I got to start cleaning out some of these reels that are on rods and get them into their Rubbermaid containers. I've never done, I've serviced these. What is this? An 808. I've serviced these vintage ones, but I haven't ever gotten one that was all oxidized like this, and I was always curious if I could bring that back around. So let's try this one. Welcome to another vintage fishing reel service video. In this episode we have a Zebco 808, and to the best of my knowledge these were cataloged between 1969 and 1976. Although you could probably get a narrower date range on the fact that this one doesn't have the little white outline around the name and model. But I don't know enough about that to get it down any closer than 69 to 76. So, let's see, how do we get this off of there? Looks like it's got a little... Oh, here we go. And I got this on at a flea market with this nice old rod, which will clean up nice, for $10, which is a heck of a good deal. These are very popular models, these old 808s. So, needless to say, pleased with that. I sometimes grab them so fast that I don't even check to make sure that they're working and even complete. In fact, this one, the thumb button isn't sticky. But so we hope that there's not missing parts in there. So this one's going to be a standard Zebco, and that you sort of hold the handle and do a counterclockwise turn and back off that spinner head. You can see the two pickup pins, which was one really popular feature of this reel. These can go in the parts tray. And then we've got a E-clip that needs to come off of there. And we should have this down to 0 before we start trying to pull that off. See how much easier that came off when you back the drag down, because the drag acts on the inside of the spool. Now, I normally just go, here, look at there, and the line's gone. But in today's episode, I'm going to try a new toy. I bought I've been pulling this off by hand. I finally bought a gadget line stripper. And here's what it looks like. Looks like a bullhorn or something, but basically this attaches to a drill. You wind it around on there with the drill, and then this pops off, and then you can slide the line off. I just looked up fishing line stripper on Amazon, and that's how I found that. I don't remember if it was $10 or $15 or what it was, but let's take and put that on there. And it looks, this is the first time I've ever used this, okay? So I think you can slink your line in down into these things to get it started. Look at there. Look at that. Me likey. That was so much faster. Cut this line off of the spool. And then presumably we can just take that and off it comes. Wow. I wish I'd have gotten that a long time ago. Yeah, that looks like factory. See the way that's not either. It was a fisherman that well, maybe that was left over from the factory. Maybe the rest of it was new line. But, you see the way that's looped like that, and then the line went up through there. That's typically the way the factory does it. And so unless it was a knowledgeable fisherman that really knew how to do it, that method, that was probably a fragment from the factory. So we can put that in the parts tray. A little concerned about this button knot. Might just be bad grease, but I'm a little concerned about that button knot going in. Get this handle off. This looks like a 7/16. And we should be able to winkle that all out of there. It looks to be all there. I'm just going to assume that button not coming back there. Maybe it was just stuck. So it looks to be complete. So we can get that nasty thing. And it looks like there's some breakage on the, well, maybe not. That looks factory. I guess that's just to get out of the way of another part. Get that in the parts tray. And then we can remove this bar here by pressing down, or no, pushing down on that, and this should slide over into that slot. Push down on the spring. Where's the little keeper thing at? I think these supposed to have like a little cap on there. Now the spring is stuck in there. There. I think that's supposed to have a little cap on there, if I recall correctly. So maybe those are missing. Maybe these aren't even the original springs. But I remember that seemed like there was a little cap on there on the top of that spring. So there's your, looks like the little felt in there for the line stop is missing. So that's going to have to be, something's going to have to be done there. See, there's your little cap on that one. See right there, that cap there. I think there's supposed to be one of those over each spring. But we can pull all that down and grab hold of that E-clip. I can't get that to go down any further. I'm losing springs and everything here. Grab hold of that E-clip, pull that off, and then this cap, well, that's not the same design. I'm thinking the cap over the springs on the line stop was just a cap rather than this long shafted thing, but at any rate. And then we can push, and of course keep in mind, and I probably should say this more often, but if you're new to this and it's an unfamiliar reel, I don't do it because I haven't got the video going, but take pictures so you can see how things were so that you know how to put it back together. But this little lever here is engaged into this hole in the anti-reverse there. And but then you can back this out. What's going on there? Like a little E-clip on there, or C-clip or something. But there's your pinion gear shaft, and then you can get your pinion gear out, and that's had some use. I don't know how if you can see how worn that is, but those teeth are worn, but not unusable, that's for sure. And if I remember correctly, we have to pull this up out of there to get the main gear out. like that. And then we should be able to winkle this out of there. Why is this thing dirty? That whole, is that, I don't remember that either. Does that bushing come off of there? Looks like there's something stopping it from coming off. Could that have been knurled on there? Doesn't look like it's not going to come off unless you damage it to get it off. So I'm not going to monkey with it. I'll lubricate good down in there and clean it up as it is. All right. These are your drag rings here. And those we'll talk about when we reassemble, but those have to line up so that this shaft goes up into these slots here. But, and I'm not going to take all those off. I'm going to lubricate, clean those without trying to take that off. So, this is ready for the parts tray. So I'm going to take this over to the sink and get all these parts cleaned up with WD-40 and Dawn dishwashing soap and a toothbrush, cotton swabs where needed, and get all that cleaned up. And I'm probably going to take and try to get this buffed out, all this, whatever this is, oxidation, whatever it is, buffed out, so we can get it to look more like that, the way it was supposed to when it was new. And we'll just see how well that works out. I know there's a lot of consternation over how to bring these back around. Some people talk about using linseed oil and say that you can never get them back to where they were. Maybe that's true. You know, maybe I'm being naive. But my thought is if that's molded green, if the color is in the plastic, that you should be able to buff that back out. Whatever oxidation, you should be able to buff down and get it shiny again. So we'll see. Okay, so there's what it looks like when it comes out of the scrubbing in the sink with soap and WD-40 and so on. Obviously, the oxidation is not gone. And so let's see what we can do with a buffing wheel. Okay, so I'm going to start by loading this up with 3M rubbing compound. It's part of a 3-stage polishing system where there's 3 of them. And I'm going to just load some up on this buffing wheel. And kind of rub that in so it doesn't sling it around everywhere. And then turn it on and lock it on. Now let's just see what happens. All right. So again, you really don't know if you got it until you wash it with soap and dry it off, because there might be oily residue from the buffing compound, but let's just assume that it's working. And honestly, I'm seeing like scratches and raised and lowered areas that, quite frankly, if you wanted to get this like new, you're probably going to have to sand it down and then do a whole bunch of buffing to get it perfect. But let's see if we can get it just presentable without having to add oils and that kind of thing, which aren't going to last. All right, so we're going to, and I rarely have to use number 3. I mean, I do that on my tractors and stuff, but usually you can get things shiny enough with the second stage compound, which is, it's called the machine polish. And of course you saw that I use a different pad. Well, I have a designated pad for each particular abrasive, so you don't get a coarse abrasive on this pad. So all right, looks real good right now. But let's just wait and see what happens when we wash that with soap and then dry it off and see if we've gotten a hold of that oxidation. Okay, so that's what it looks like after the buffing with rubbing compound and then a machine polish, which isn't bad. So this is completely washed and dried, and you can see where I didn't get it quite as well as I did over here, but there's no oil on it or anything like that. So here's this one I didn't spend as much time. You can see where I buffed it a little bit more with the rubbing compound. You know, it's gotten rid of the oxidation. Basically what this shows is that with enough effort you can at least get rid of the oxidation. But I don't know if you can see on there, but it looks like the surface of one of Jupiter's oceanic moons. Looks like ice and cracks and stuff in there. It's not real deep. I don't know what's caused that, if it's been beat up or whatever, but I still think we can get this looking like new. If this is in fact, if the color's molded into the plastic, we ought to be able to sand that and buff it out. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 320 sandpaper and start. You can even see, you see the dimples in it where it's, you know, where I've sanded versus where I've not. So those shiny spots are the low points. So I'm going to spend some time off camera and I'm going to sand that with the 320 until I get rid of all those, till all those low points are sanded and it's nice and matte and consistent throughout. And then I'm going to move up to 400 and then 600, and I'm going to buff again, and hopefully we'll be able to see our, we can comb our hair in the reflection. Okay, so there it is after the 320, and that's been rinsed and dried. And so now it's time for the 400 grit. And this sandpaper is a little moist, but you can see that it's taking out the scratches from the 320. So let me get that done and I'll be back. Okay, there it is after the 400 grit. Not a perfect job. I'm getting ahead of myself, rushing. You can see a few imperfections there, but not too bad everywhere else. So on to the next grit. Okay, so there's the final grit of sandpaper, all dry. And now I'm heading out to the workshop to put it on the buffing wheel, and I'm going to do a couple different grits of, you know, like the rubbing compound and then some polish, and we'll see where we're at. All right, back from the workshop, and I've got it all buffed with the rubbing compound and then 2 stages of machine polish. and it looks pretty darn good, but I can still see scratches in there where basically I rushed it trying to get this video done, but it proves that you can do this through sanding and buffing, and if you take your time, unlike what I did, leaving some scratches in there between grits, you can get this to where you can see your face, and comb your hair in the reflection. So this is the proper way to restore the luster on a oxidized and faded. And you're never going to get down in those little teeth there, but you can see the difference between one that has been sanded and buffed versus one that was buffed only. Now I could have gotten a little bit better. I mean, it got pretty good right there. I didn't spend as much time on some of these other areas, but that's the difference between sanding and polishing versus just polishing or buffing. So now I got to go and do the rest of this. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time around the Zebco logo here because I don't want to grind off or sand off the logo and the model number, but I'm going to clean this up with sandpaper and do the same thing and have this have the rear cover looking as good as the front cover. But that'll last. That's a job that will last beyond just putting oil or linseed oil on it or something. You keep this out of the sun and it'll stay like that forever. In fact, I think I have one of these, either an 808 or 800 that's pristine, that never got oxidized, and I'll take and bring that out and put it side by side with this one when I'm all done. Okay, so now that the aesthetics are taken care of, before we start putting this back together, we've got to repair this line break ring. And so what I've done is I've taken this to the hardware store, and I found the closest O-ring that I can find, and you want that O-ring to be a little bit higher than the edge of that brake ring, as you can see that is, so that the rubber catches the line, not the metal, because then you'd be nicking up your line. But as you can see, while it is pretty good, it isn't quite a perfect fit. Okay, and so rather than try to carve that around there and to try to get that to fit, I'm just going to cut the O-ring, and I'm going to start gluing it in. And I might even, let's just see here. It's probably going to be best to start gluing it in, except for the tips here where I cut it, and then I can trim that until it fits. So I'm just going to use this shoe glue. It's kind of, I think, similar to E6000 or Goop or whatever, but it's permanent, but not quite as permanent as something like super glue, so that it can be reversed if need be, but it's thick enough to hold. Hopefully this stuff, maybe I better get some more out of here from deeper down, because this is kind of a little too viscous. It's almost kind of like the consistency of rubber cement, but probably a little bit more holding capacity than rubber cement. I can clean up the messy part once I get this installed. So I'm going to just start to set that in place. Ooh. and kind of clean up some of the excess around the edges there. And then you're going to see it come together down here, and then you can see how much you're going to need to trim off. So you can see where it sort of comes together and overlaps there. Then I'm going to have to trim almost 1/4 of an inch of it off. That's just about perfect. That's just about perfect. You're not going to get any more perfect than that. So I can clean up some of this. It's not really too bad. Not too much. I can clean up this excess later when it starts to set up. But that is a repaired drag ring using an O-ring and slightly trimming it to fit. All right, let's get this glue out of here before I lose consciousness from the fumes. And now we should be ready for reassembly. If I could remember how to do it after all that. Let's get all our parts out here. Okay, we're going to start off by sneaking some oil down in here, and hopefully it works its way. This bushing just, there's a little shelf there that won't let that out. So we're going to oil that up good and insert it back where it belongs. It's moving beautifully. So that's the main gear. We can, while we're thinking about the main gear, grease the teeth. Just pack those teeth with grease and wipe up a little bit of that residue. And now we can oil our pinion gear shaft. And push that up through. And put our pinion gear in and grease that. And then we got to drop down this little anti-reverse gadget here. Okay, and then our spring, and let's get some oil in here. And now our E-clip. So Anti-reverse is working. Well, kind of. Let's see. Oh yeah, I gotta. That was the anti-reverse off switch was engaged, so now the anti-reverse is working. And although there's some oil already seeping down in there, we can oil underneath that a little bit, maybe around the pivot point, etc. We can try to sneak some oil underneath this gear here. And then we have to insert our drag, and that has to be done in such a way where we've got to line up these drag rings. And there's some thin slots and some thick slots. And I believe it's the thick slots that we want all lined up like that. And then this shaft goes up in between them like that, so that when you turn this, that shaft, it's narrow on one side and broad on another, so when you turn the drag, it twists and it spreads those drag rings out. So this would be all the way off. See how that's working? Very narrow, and then I'm turning up the drag, it's pushing those drag rings out against the inside of the spool. Get a little grease or a little oil there, maybe some in there and there. Okay, how's our drag ring coming along here? Clean off some of this excess glue. Not, what did I call it? Drag ring. I meant to say line stop or line break ring. All right. So this is going to come up through these two holes here, like so, and then we've got our springs. And again, I don't know if these are the actual factory springs or if somebody's replaced them, but somebody will know out there. But I think there's supposed to be some caps over they've springs, and they've probably been lost over the years. Put a little grease there. So we're ready to start putting the guts back into the body. And getting the handle on. I'm going to have to bend that handle a little bit. It looks like this one's bent in. Line brake is working. There's our little bait clicker right there. And of course, these grooves go down, so that's what engages the bait clicker. And because this drag is based on the spool, and the spool spins around this spindle, we're going to go ahead and grease that and this thing here. just to put a less wear and tear on the pickup pin arms. And then that can slide down or drag as it. Uh-oh. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Not much of a line or drag clicker. Isn't that line brake supposed to go all the way up? Oh no, it goes up against the spinner head. Dumb. Alright, so we're going to put a little oil along where these ride on the spinner head and on the pivot points. Work that in. And you can see this block where that pivot or where that pickup pin goes in is split. But so far it's not an issue. This one's starting to split too, but I don't think it's going to be a big issue. Alright, before we mess with that, we got to get our E-clip on here. And then we can spin this on. You hear that gear lash? That's because that pinion gear is really warm. But it's working. It's working and usable. Now I think the button is working now. So I'll check those pickup pins. They're going in. Spool is going up. Pickup pins are going in. Wind, they come out. Spool drops back, spinner head drops back down. You can see the line brake is meeting up with the spinner head when I push up on it. So that line brake should be working. When we put the cover on, screw it on, the drain hole will be at the bottom. So let's wipe this off. And set it next to a pristine one. So this sat down there. This is a pristine one here. Or relatively so. It's got a few little abrasions in it, but that one's still got... Now this one's a little bit different because this one has a raised logo and this one has an inset logo. And the color's slightly different. So these are obviously were made in different years. But from what that one started out looking like to what it is now, not too bad. We've lost the white paint on the logo and this and that, and on the plus minus on the drag, and on the on-off switch. But those are raised letters, so you can still read it. But anti-reverse is working. I can turn it off, and you got that. So yeah, I'm really pleased with that. It took a little elbow grease to get it looking pretty. Wouldn't have taken much at all just to get it functional. But I like the way it looks. Wouldn't be embarrassed to take that out and fish. We fixed the line brake ring and so on. Got a lot of gear lash, but it'll work. So took a little extra time with that one, but there it is, a Zebco 808 heavy hauler. I don't know if Jim Bailey watches these or not, but Jim Bailey's the president of or SHH, Save the Heavy Hauler. So shout out to Jim. This one made sometime between 1969 and 1976. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.